Richard Nixon, H.R. Haldeman, John Mitchell, John Ehrlichman, John Dean. A lot of you don't even remember it, but history tells us that at one time those were the 5 most powerful and influential men in America. In fact, they were among some of the most 5 influential and powerful men in the world. And then it all came crashing down. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. And all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Humpty Dumpty was our president, Richard Nixon. And he had a great fall, Watergate. The Watergate scandal that was part of our nation from 1972 to 1974. And all the president's men, those 4 that I just mentioned, couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Richard Nixon became the first and only president to resign the office of the presidency. He did that on August 9th, 1974. And why couldn't they put Humpty Dumpty back together again? Because of what had happened previously. The Watergate scandal began when 5 bungling burglars broke into the Democratic National Headquarters, and that was housed at the Watergate office complex in D.C. They got caught. And when they got caught, they began to talk. And that's when the cover-up started. That's when the lies began. And one lie followed the next lie. And you know how it sometimes is when you lie? You get in so deep that you can't dig yourself out. According to the FBI, the man who was most responsible for the cover-up was this man, John Dean, the man with the angel face and the very calm demeanor. He served as White House counsel to the president, and it was the FBI that called John Dean the master manipulator. The FBI saw Dean as the guy almost responsible for it all, and when it became very apparent to Dean that he would be the fall guy, that he would become Richard Nixon's scapegoat, here's what the master manipulator became. He turned into the star witness. He was the star witness before the Senate Watergate hearings. After all of this happened, why did he have a pang of conscience and become the star witness? Probably the promise of leniency. He ended up serving only 4 months in a minimum security outside Baltimore, Maryland. And soon after, he wrote a book. And the book is called Blind Ambition. He became rich off the book. He hit the talk circuit. And in the book, he writes that his blind ambition got in the way of his serving. He also acknowledges that he had a part in all of the things that happened in Watergate, and he also said that he was sorry. I don't know if he was truly sorry or if he was just sorry that he got caught. We'll probably never know. The only person who really knows is Dean himself. Today, we are going to look at 2 of Jesus' most well-known disciples. The names were James and John. And these 2 disciples had a little bit of John Dean in them, blind ambition. And by teaching James and John, and also teaching us, Here's what Jesus says about blind ambition. Blind ambition is self-seeking. Listen to verses 35 to 37 again. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do for us whatever we ask." "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory." Hold your hand close in front of your eyes. And when you hold your hand close in front of your eyes, that's all you see. All you see is your hand. Everything else is blocked out. James and John were holding their hand close to their eyes, and everything else was blacked out. Their request reveals a self-serving and selfish attitude about discipleship, about ministry. And what really had to annoy Jesus, as James and John came to him with this request, is that they were listening to Jesus, and as they listened, they heard only what they wanted to hear. You will recall last week we had the lesson of the rich young man. And the rich young man walked away sad. And shortly after, as they see him almost walking away, Jesus said these words to his disciples: "When the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones." Then, shortly after he said that, Jesus opened the curtain a little wider on his approaching passion and death. What did James latch on to? The answer to that question is revealed. We want the highest spots in heaven. We want one of us to sit at your right and one of us to sit at your left. They latched on to the glory. Instead of scolding his disciples, "Fellas, you're not listening to me." Instead of letting them have it and calling them a bunch of morons, what does he do? Jesus puts it this way. "You don't know what you are asking," Jesus said. "Can you drink the cup I drink, or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?" "We can," they answered. Jesus said to them, "You will drink the cup I drink, and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared." Drink the cup is an expression that the Jews used for facing extreme suffering. Maybe it's similar to our asking someone, "You sure you can handle it?" And Jesus' reference to baptism is where our saying baptism under fire originates. It's facing the fire of persecution. And in both expressions, Jesus is pointing ahead to his crucifixion on the cross. And in answering, "we can," James and John were way in over their heads. They were self-serving. They were looking only at the glory, overlooking the means to that glory, drinking the cup of suffering, and facing the fire of persecution. There's an old story about a football team that was facing a much better opponent. And the coach knew that his only chance was to hand off the ball to his lightning fast running back named Calhoun. And a rather cocky Calhoun agreed. And as the game began, every time Calhoun ran the ball, he was getting pounded. He was just getting pounded. And as the game wore on, the coach chose to stick to his strategy. He called a time out, and he called the quarterback over, and he said to his quarterback, keep handing the ball off to Calhoun. But the quarterback said, Calhoun doesn't want the ball. That was James and John, right? Cocky at this point, when push came to shove, with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane on Maundy, Thursday, they didn't want the ball. They made it very clear, right? They ran out on Jesus. They wanted no part of drinking that cup or baptism under fire, and that is what blind ambition does. It sees only the glory. It doesn't see the grit and grime of ministry, of serving, and it's safe to say that Jesus wasn't happy with these two, and neither were the other 10. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. The other disciples were steamed at James and John, and I think I probably know why. Because they didn't ask first. They were just as blind in their ambition as James and John, just as self-serving. And let's be honest, sometimes the same thing can happen to us. I want to show you something. Most of you have probably used this at one point. How many of you have ever played tennis? Right? You play tennis, and in order to play tennis well, how does it all start? It all starts with the serve. In order to play tennis well, in order to win the game, it all begins with the serve. What's true of playing tennis is true of discipleship. In order to serve well, in order to play the game, it all starts with serving. Serving well. Because if we don't serve well, our life of discipleship will lag, and we will lose the edge that our time and our talents, the gifts God has given you to use, opportunities will be missed. Ministries will suffer. Because that's what blind ambition does. It's self-serving. It looks only to ourselves. And so Jesus takes time to now call his disciples together, and he uses it as a teaching moment, a teaching opportunity. Blind ambition is self-serving. Now, as Jesus goes on, he talks about godly ambition. And what does godly ambition seek? It seeks to serve. Verses 42 to 44. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all." The Gentiles were the Romans who occupied the land and ruled Palestine. They loved their titles. They loved to be pampered because of their power. They loved to be catered to and made to feel very important. And it proves the old adage that the more things change, the more they remain the same. We're not much different from them. We're not much different from the Old Testament patriarch Jacob. Remember how he came out of the womb? Jacob means heel grabber. He came out of the womb grabbing his brother's heel. And by nature, that's what all of us want to do. We would much rather grab than we would give. Not so with you, Jesus reinforces. With faith comes a new attitude. And our attitude is copied after Christ. Verse 45, highlight of this whole section. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus drank his cup down. Behind the parsonage, in the alley right here, are dumpsters where the garbage is thrown. In Denver, the homeless people would go through the dumpsters. It was called dumpster diving. As crude as it sounds, Jesus gave up his mansion in heaven to live among the homeless and the dumpster divers. Jesus laid aside his crown of thorns, his crown of glory, to put on a crown of thorns. Jesus became sin to make us sinless. Jesus died to give us life. And Jesus' baptism under fire were the very fires of hell itself. Some of the most hideous words, some of the most awful words ever spoken were some of the words that Jesus said on the cross. When he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Those words are not only awful and horrible, they are also beautiful and glorious. God forsook his own Son so that he would never forsake you and me. More than 25 years ago, I sat in a dentist-like chair. I was about to have surgery. And as I'm sitting there, you know how you're kind of reclined in that chair? I looked up, and there was a large poster, and it was pinned to the ceiling. And I squinted, and it looked like some sort of big animal. Minutes later, literally minutes later, I looked up, and I could see crystal clear. It was a large gorilla looking down at me. I had LASIK surgery. That LASIK surgery completely changed my focus. It completely changed the way I see the world around me. That's what faith does. Faith completely changes our focus. It completely changes how we see the world around us. The gospel, the love of Jesus Christ, fills us with Jesus' love. And as he pours that love into us, he does so that that love can flow out of us. Faith and love transform us from blind ambition, from just seeking only what's in it for me, to godly ambition that seeks to serve. What is godly ambition? Godly ambition is the little child who takes a quarter and puts it in the offering plate with a smile on his face. Godly ambition is a young woman studying to be a teacher, or a young man studying to be a pastor, when both have the gifts to become doctors. Godly ambition is that humble member who we might not even know or might not ever even see, who every single night says his or her prayers for fellow members. Godly ambition is the father who works hard all day and still has time at night to spend with his kids. Godly ambition is doing the best we can do wherever we are, whenever we have the opportunity. I want you to look at this racket again. And for a while, James and John didn't use this racket very well. They weren't in the business of serving. Then something happened which changed all of that. And what happened was the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Remember what Jesus said to them? You will drink that cup. You will undergo that baptism of fire. You will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. Not long after Jesus' resurrection, King Herod wanted to teach the New Testament church a lesson. And in order to teach that New Testament church a lesson, you know what he did? He had James, who kind of was the first president of the Christian church, beheaded. And not long after that, a Roman emperor wanted to teach the Apostle John a lesson. And so he taught him a lesson by having him exiled to the island of Patmos. And just think how many times while John was exiled on that island of Patmos, he heard his Savior's words in his ears. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. We hear Jesus' words too. Simply put, that is why we serve. Amen.